The air in Station Omega-9's cantina was thick with smoke from a dozen different worlds. Purple mist from Centauri cigars mixed with the sweet vapor of Andromedon dream pipes. In the corner booth furthest from the entrance sat a figure that most patrons avoided without even knowing why. Thokfar had been coming to this cantina for 7 years now. Same booth, same drink, same haunted expression that never seemed to leave his face. His massive frame filled the reinforced chair, 6 arms moving with the careful precision of someone who had learned to control every muscle through sheer force of will. The scars covering his chitinous hide told stories he wished he could forget. The Zephyrian's compound eyes tracked every movement in the cantina with military precision. Even now, decades after the war had ended, a habit that had kept him alive when death was always one heartbeat away. His primary hands gripped the glass of fermented Altarian wine, while his secondary arms rested on the table, ready to reach for weapons that were no longer there. The cantina's regular crowd gave him space. Not out of respect, but out of instinct. Something primitive in their brains recognized a predator, even a broken one. Thokfar had been one of the Coalition's finest warriors once. Now he was just another veteran drinking his memories away. The young reporter had been watching him for an hour before she finally worked up the courage to approach. Lixara moved between the tables with the awkward grace of someone more comfortable behind a news desk than in the field. Her bioluminescent patches flickered in patterns that any experienced spacer could read like an open book. Nervousness, determination, fear. She clutched her recording device like a lifeline as she approached his table. The closer she got, the more she understood why others kept their distance. Thokvar wasn't just big, he was dangerous in a way that went beyond physical size. Power radiated from him like heat from a fusion core. "Commander Thokvar?" Her voice came out smaller than she intended. The veteran didn't look up from his drink. "Not a commander anymore. Haven't been for 27 years. I'm Lixora from Galactic News Network. I was hoping I could ask you about your service during the Human War." Thokfar's mandibles clicked once, a sound like breaking ceramic. "Go away, child. Find someone else to bother." Lixara had come too far to give up now. This story could make her career. Veterans from the Human War rarely spoke to reporters, and never about what they'd actually seen. "Please, sir. The galaxy needs to understand what really happened during the siege of Kepler 7. The official reports don't match the casualty numbers. People deserve to know the truth." For the first time, Thokvar looked up. All 6 of his compound eyes focused on her with an intensity that made her step back. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire ready to snap. "You want to know about humans?" His voice was quiet, but it cut through the cantina's noise like a plasma. Blade through, armor plating. Every conversation at nearby tables died. Even the bartender, a grizzled ex-marine with 3 cybernetic limbs, stopped polishing glasses to listen. Thokvar gestured to the chair across from him with one of his lower arms. "Sit, but understand something first. Once you hear what I have to say, you'll never sleep soundly again. You'll look up at the stars and wonder what's out there in the dark, watching you back." Lixara sat down carefully, her recording device already humming to life. The soft blue glow indicated it was capturing not just audio, but bio-readings and environmental data. This interview would be analyzed by experts across 12 star systems within hours of broadcast. Thokvar lifted his glass with 2 hands, the liquid inside sloshing with the slight tremor he could never quite control anymore. The tremor wasn't from age or injury. It was from memory. 27 years ago, I was Lieutenant Thokvar's 2nd Assault Division, Coalition Special Forces. Best of the best, they told us. We'd fought the Andromedon rebels, crushed the Centauri uprising, brought peace to 47 systems. Voice took on the cadence of someone reciting an old speech. We thought we knew war. The cantina had gone completely quiet now. Even the background music from the entertainment system seemed muted. The mission briefing was simple. 30,000 human colonists had established an illegal mining operation on Kepler 7. Rich deposits of quantum crystals needed for our faster-than-light drives. The humans claimed salvage rights under some ancient Earth treaty nobody, else recognized. Thokvar's laugh was bitter, the sound a wounded animal might make. Command called it pest control. Lixara leaned forward, her patches now glowing with excitement. This was exactly what she'd hoped for, a first-hand account from someone who'd been there. We assembled the largest fleet in Coalition history. 50,000 warships from 37 different worlds, dreadnoughts that could crack planets, fighters that moved faster than thought itself. The entire Third Fleet, plus reinforcements from 5 other sectors. Thokvar's eyes seemed to look through her, seeing something far away and long ago. For 30,000 miners and their families, that seems like overwhelming force for such a small colony, Lixara said carefully. Overwhelming? Thokvar set down his glass with enough force to crack the table. Child, we barely survived, and we were the lucky ones. 27 years earlier, space around Kepler-7 looked like a metal storm. 50,000 Coalition. Warships filled the darkness, their hulls gleaming under the system's twin suns. The massive vessels hung motionless, like predators waiting to strike. At the center of this deadly formation floated the CNS Dominator, Admiral Vexter's flagship, a 3-kilometer beast of steel and plasma. Cannons that had never lost a battle. Lieutenant Thokvar stood on the bridge of the assault cruiser Talons, Edge, watching the tactical displays with excitement. This was his first major deployment, and he wanted to prove himself worthy of the Coalition's Special Forces insignia burned into his armor. Around him, veteran soldiers checked their weapons and joked about the easy mission ahead. "Look at that," laughed Sergeant Crixenel, pointing at the planet below. "One little mining colony? My grandmother could take that place with a cooking spoon." The planet itself seemed peaceful enough. Kepler-7 was mostly rock and ice, with a thin atmosphere that required environmental suits for most species. Human settlement was visible as a small cluster of lights on the dark side of the world, prefabricated buildings, mining equipment, and what looked like a small spaceport. Intelligence reports counted exactly 30,247 humans living there. Men, women, children, all just trying to make a living, pulling quantum crystals from the frozen ground. "Admiral," Vexter's voice echoed across every ship in the fleet. The old Zerethian had won more battles than most officers had even seen, his four-armed frame decorated with medals from a dozen different wars.
Ow!
When he spoke, entire armies listened. "Humans of Kepler-7, his words boomed across all communication frequencies. "You have 30 minutes to surrender unconditionally. Evacuate your illegal mining operation and prepare for Coalition occupation. Resist and face complete annihilation." The response came back almost immediately. The voice belonged to someone named Dong Wu, identified by Coalition intelligence. As the colony administrator, he sounded like he was discussing the weather, calm and relaxed, despite having 50,000 warships pointed at his home. "Admiral Vexter, this is Colony Administrator Dong Wu. We've received your message and discussed it thoroughly. After careful consideration, we respectfully decline your generous offer." Silence filled the bridge of every Coalition ship. Officers looked at each other in confusion. Had these humans lost their minds? Did they understand what they were facing? Thokvar found himself laughing, along with his squad mates. Did he just say no to the entire Third Fleet? "These soft little creatures have more courage than brains," chuckled Commander Rixon, a battle-scarred veteran who'd fought on 17. "Different worlds. Well, courage won't stop plasma cannons. Prepare for landing." The first wave of dropships launched at dawn, local time. 2,000 armored transports descended through Kepler-7's thin atmosphere like falling stars. Thokvar's unit was assigned to secure the main settlement, what the humans called New Sol. Intelligence said it housed about 8,000 people, mostly families of the miners. This would be quick and clean. The dropship's pilot was a young Altarian named Zixel, who kept up a steady stream of nervous chatter as they descended. "First time seeing humans up close," he said over the comm. "Heard they're really strange looking. Only 2 arms. Can you believe it? They don't even have proper armor plating." Thokvar checked his plasma rifle one more time. The weapon could punch through tank armor, designed to stop the toughest opponents the galaxy could throw at them. Using it against unarmored civilians felt almost unfair. The dropship touched down in what looked like the colony's main square. Through the viewports, Thokvar could see the human building's simple metal structures that wouldn't stop a strong wind, much less military weapons. Everything looked quiet, almost deserted. Sensors showed life signs in the buildings, reported the ship's scanning officer. Lots of them. They're probably hiding and waiting for us to leave. Commander Rixan activated his external speakers. Humans. Of New Sol, this is Coalition Special Forces. Exit your buildings with your hands visible. You will not be harmed if you cooperate. The response was immediate and definitely not what they expected. The ground beneath their dropship exploded. The blast sent their transport tumbling across the square like a toy. Emergency systems screamed warnings as Thokovar fought to stay conscious. Through the ringing in his ears, he could hear Commander Rixan shouting orders. They mined the landing zone. All units, combat positions. Thokvar kicked open the damaged exit hatch and rolled out into what should have been a simple occupation. Instead, he found himself in the middle of a war zone. Plasma bolts streaked across the square from every direction. The humans hadn't. Just hidden, they'd turned their entire settlement into a fortress. Sir? Thokvar called to his commander as another explosion rocked the area. These aren't soldiers. Human female appeared from behind an overturned mining crawler. She was small, by Coalition standards, middle-aged with gray hair tied back in a simple knot. She looked like she should be tending a garden somewhere, not holding a modified plasma rifle that looked like it had been built from mining equipment. Her name tag, visible through Thokvar's scope, read Sunya, mining supervisor. Door. Raised her improvised weapon and opened fire with surgical precision. 6 Coalition soldiers dropped in as many seconds. Her advanced armor no match for the concentrated plasma beam she'd somehow coaxed from civilian equipment. Fall back! Commander Rixan screamed, but it was too late. The humans were everywhere. They emerged from storm drains, from hidden tunnels, from buildings that sensors had shown as empty. Children, actual human children who couldn't have been, more than 10 years old, were loading ammunition belts and carrying supplies to adult fighters. An elderly man named Taman appeared at the eastern edge of the settlement, smiled and waved at the Coalition forces, then pressed a button on a device in his hand. The entire eastern sector of New Sol disappeared in a fireball that could be seen from orbit. Taman had rigged the mining charges stored in that area to detonate rather than let them fall into Coalition hands. He'd vaporized himself along with 300 Coalition soldiers and half the settlement's infrastructure. Siege that was supposed to last 30 minutes stretched into hours, then days, then weeks. Every time the Coalition thought they had the humans cornered, more fighters would appear from nowhere. Every time they captured a building, it would explode. Every time they advanced, the humans would fade away like ghosts, only to attack from a completely different direction. The humans weren't just fighting. They were learning, adapting, getting better at killing Coalition soldiers with every passing day. 4 months into what should have been a 3-day operation, Kepler-7 had become a graveyard. The once pristine mining colony now looked like the surface of a dead moon. Craters where buildings used to stand, twisted metal reaching toward the sky like skeletal fingers, and smoke that never seemed to clear from the thin atmosphere. Thokvar dragged himself through the wreckage of the hydroponics facility, leaving a trail of blue biofluid behind him. His advanced combat armor, designed to withstand direct hits from military-grade weapons, hung in tatters around his 6-limbed frame. Humans had gotten better at finding weak spots in Coalition gear, much better. The ambush had come from nowhere, like all human attacks. One moment his squad was advancing through what their scanners showed as empty ruins. The next, the ground erupted with hidden fighters who seemed to materialize from the very stones themselves. Plasma fire had come from every direction at once, coordinated with the precision of a military unit that had trained together for years, except these weren't soldiers. Intelligence reports still insisted the humans had no formal military on Kepler-7. These were miners, engineers, shopkeepers, teachers, civilians who had somehow learned to fight like elite. Commandos in just 4 months of warfare. The plasma blast that had taken down Thokvar came from a human who couldn't have been more than 16 years old. A kid named Jin Ho, who worked in the colony's tech repair shop. Before the siege, his biggest worry had been fixing broken mining equipment. Now he could place shots through moving targets at 300 meters with a weapon he'd built himself. From spare parts, Thokuvar's communications system crackled with static and distant voices. His squad was scattered, probably dead. The coalition had lost over 8,000 soldiers in the past week alone, trying to take a single city block that the humans defended with the fury of cornered animals. Each breath sent fire through his damaged respiratory system. A plasma blast had torn through his lower torso, cooking internal organs and severing the main biofluid lines that kept his body functioning. Coalition medical training told him he had maybe 10 minutes before complete system failure. He could hear them approaching, human voices speaking in their strange musical language. Thokvar had learned to recognize some of their words during the long months of fighting, coordinating, moving through the ruins with the careful steps of experienced hunters. His thermal sensors picked up at least 6 signatures, all carrying weapons. This was how it would end. Alone on an alien world, killed by creatures barely half his size, who had turned their peaceful mining colony into the Coalition's worst nightmare. Thokvar had seen entire star systems fall to the Coalition war machine. He'd watched alien civilizations surrender after seeing just a fraction of their military might. But these humans, they just kept fighting. A shadow fell across his broken body. Thokvar looked up, expecting to see a weapon pointed at his head. Instead, he saw something that made no sense at all. A human female stood over him, but instead of a gun, she carried medical supplies. She was young, maybe 20 years, old by human standards, with short black hair that stuck out at odd angles under a makeshift helmet. Her clothes were a mixture of civilian gear and scavenged military equipment. Her name tag, somehow still attached to her jacket after months of war, read Eugen, medical technician. Please, Thokvar wheezed in broken standard Galactic, the common language most species used for communication. Make it quick. Eugene knelt beside him, her hands already pulling out a medical scanner. The device looked like standard human technology, probably salvaged from the colony's medical center. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to help. Thokvar's compound eyes focused on her with difficulty. But ... I am your enemy. My people came to destroy your world. Right now, you're just hurt. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, biofoam, sealing his wounds with techniques that seemed far too advanced for a colony medic. And I'm a medic. That's what matters. The scanner beeped softly as it analyzed his injuries. Eugen frowned at the readings, then began pulling more supplies from her medical kit. Around them, the battle continued to rage. Coalition artillery thundered in the distance, trying to dislodge human fighters from the Eastern District. Explosions lit up the perpetual twilight of Kepler-7's dust-choked sky. Human fighters darted between the ruins like ghosts, their faces painted with ash and determination. Some were adults, but Thokvar could see teenagers and even children. Among them, all carried weapons. All moved with the deadly purpose of people fighting for their very survival. And here, in the middle of this hell, a human was saving the life of an alien invader. Why? Thokvar asked as she lifted him onto a makeshift stretcher built for mining equipment and medical padding. Eugen paused, looking back at him with those strange soft eyes that seemed to hold depths of emotion no Zephyrian could understand. Her species had pupils that moved and changed size, unlike the compound eyes of his people. They seemed to show feelings directly, like windows into their minds. Because that's who we choose to be, she said simply. The stretcher was crude but effective. Eugen had somehow rigged it with small hoverpods salvaged from mining drones, allowing her to move him despite his massive weight. She guided him through the ruins with the same careful precision that human fighters use to avoid Coalition patrols. They passed other humans during the journey, fighters taking positions, children carrying supplies, elderly people tending to equipment. All of them looked at Thokvar with expressions he couldn't read. Some seemed curious, others angry, but none tried to harm him. They trusted Eugen's judgment completely. 20 minutes later, she delivered him to a Coalition rescue team that had been searching for survivors. She said nothing to the Coalition soldiers, just made sure Thokvar was stable. and melted back into the ruins like she'd never existed at all. Thokvar never saw Yuzhin again, but he heard reports over the following weeks. The human medic Hood saved Coalition soldiers. It's a fighter who could place plasma shots with surgical precision. The woman who died 2 weeks later when she tried to dig wounded civilians from a collapsed shelter that Coalition bombardment had brought down. The same hands that had saved his life had been loading ammunition belts that morning, helping human fighters prepare for their next attack against his squad mates. Those gentle fingers that had sealed his wounds with such care had also been building improvised weapons with deadly efficiency. The contradiction broke something fundamental in Thokvar's understanding of warfare, of life itself. How could the same person be both healer and killer? How could someone save the life of an enemy while actively fighting to destroy his people? It made no sense according to everything the Coalition had taught him about combat and survival. But somehow, it was perfectly human. 8 months after the siege began, Mount Kepler rose from the frozen wasteland like a monument to human stubbornness. The massive peak dominated the northern continent, its slopes covered in ice that never melted under the weak light of Kepler-7's distant sun. Carved into the mountainside, Firebase Delta looked like a metallic growth that had somehow infected the stone itself. Captain Thokvar studied the fortress through his tactical scope, counting gun positions and defensive barriers. His promotion from lieutenant had come at a terrible cost. 3 commanding officers dead, his original unit reduced from 200 soldiers to barely 30 survivors. The humans had taught the Coalition the true meaning of attrition warfare. Firebase Delta was the last human stronghold on the planet. Intelligence estimated 3,000 survivors huddled inside its reinforced walls, a mixture of miners, engineers, families, and the handful of security personnel who had somehow transformed into military commanders during 8 months of desperate fighting. The Coalition had sacrificed 40,000 troops to reach this moment, turning what should have been a simple police action into the bloodiest campaign in their military history. The final assault force stretched across the valley below Mount Kepler like a metallic sea. 50,000 fresh troops, heavy artillery, orbital bombardment platforms, and enough firepower to crack the planet's crust. Admiral Vexter had called in reinforcements from 6 different sectors, determined to end this embarrassment once and for all. Thokvar's communication system crackled to life as the Admiral's voice echoed across the mountainside. Humans of Firebase Delta, this is Admiral Vexter of the Coalition 3rd Fleet. You are completely surrounded. Your resistance is futile. Surrender now, and your lives will be spared. The response came back within minutes, transmitted on an open frequency that every soldier in the assault force could hear. The voice belonged to someone named Hyanwu, identified by Coalition intelligence as the human military commander. His voice was tired, worn down by months of constant battle, but unbroken. Admiral Vexter, this is Commander Hyanwu. We've received your message and discussed it with our people. We have a counter-proposal for you. Leave our system immediately, and we won't take any more of your soldiers with us when we go. Silence filled the communication channels, then nervous laughter began to ripple through the Coalition ranks. 3,000 humans, trapped on a mountain with no hope of escape or reinforcement, were threatening 50,000 Coalition troops backed by orbital bombardment. Thokvar felt no urge to laugh. He'd learned to take human threats seriously. The humans never bluffed. When they said they would do something, they did it, regardless of the cost to themselves. The final assault began at dawn, local time. Coalition forces swarmed up the mountainside. Like an army of metal insects, their movements coordinated by tactical computers and orbital surveillance. Artillery shells screamed overhead, pounding the human defenses with precision strikes designed to minimize damage to the quantum. Crystal mines below, the humans met them at every turn. Minho was 15 years old, according to his identification card, found later in the rubble. Before the siege, he'd been a student in the colony's small school, learning mathematics and basic engineering. He held a critical choke point for 3 solid hours, his improvised plasma rifle taking down Coalition soldiers with shots that would have impressed military snipers. The boy had turned a narrow passage between two rock formations into a killing field. Coalition forces couldn't advance without exposing themselves to his fire. But they couldn't retreat either. Too many troops were backing up behind them. For 3 hours, one human teenager held up an entire battalion when a coalition sniper finally got a clear shot. Min Ho was reloading his weapon with ammunition belts that looked like they'd been handmade from mining equipment. He died still reaching for his rifle, unwilling to give up even in his final moments. Yoon Young had been the colony's chief engineer before the war. She'd spent her career designing systems to extract quantum crystals from solid rock, solving problems that required both creativity and precise technical knowledge. During the siege, she'd turned those same skills toward military applications with terrifying results. As coalition forces breached the outer defenses of Firebase Delta, Yoon Young retreated to the power generation center she'd been working on, something in secret for weeks, modifying the fusion reactor that provided energy to the entire base. When coalition troops entered the facility, she triggered a controlled overload that turned the reactor into a directed energy weapon. The explosion vaporized an entire coalition battalion, 800 soldiers gone in a flash of superheated plasma that could be seen from orbit. Yunang died in the blast, but she'd bought the remaining defenders precious. It's time to fall back to their final positions. But numbers tell their own story. Slowly, inevitably, the coalition forces pushed forward. Human defenders fell back through prepared positions, fighting delaying actions that cost both sides heavily. Children too young to carry weapons acted as ammunition runners. Elderly colonists who should have been evacuated months ago manned communication stations and medical posts. The humans retreated to their final position, the command center at the heart of Firebase Delta. The reinforced structure had been carved directly into the mountain's core, surrounded by layers of defensive barriers and automated weapon systems. It was their last stand. "This is Commander Hyan Wu." The human leader's voice crackled over all communication frequencies. "To any human forces receiving this transmission, we are uploading our complete tactical analysis of coalition military doctrine to the quantum relay network. We've learned their weaknesses, their patterns, their methods. Learn from our deaths. Make them count." Thokvar was among the first coalition troops to breach the command center. The final assault had cost them another 2,000 soldiers. But they'd finally broken through. Inside, he found Hyan Wu at his command station, hands steady on a control panel despite the chaos around him. The bodies of his final defenders lay scattered across the floor, men and women who'd died protecting their leader's last moments. "It's over," Thokvar said. His plasma rifle trained on the human commander. Hyan Wu looked up, and Thokvar was struck by how young the man appeared, despite the gray in his hair and the lines around his eyes. He looked human in a way that transcended. Species tired, determined, and completely unafraid. "No," Hyan Wu said quietly, his finger poised over a large red button on his control panel. "It's just beginning." He pressed the button. The dark matter implosion device that the humans had been building in secret for months activated with a sound like reality tearing apart. Firebase Delta, the surrounding mountain, and 15,000 coalition troops simply ceased to exist. The explosion was visible from orbit, a brief, brilliant star that marked the end of human resistance on Kepler 7, but the data burst had already been transmitted across the galaxy. Every human colony, every hidden outpost, every ship in the void now possessed detailed intelligence on coalition tactics, weaknesses, and military capabilities. The humans had weaponized their own extinction, turning their final defeat into a weapon that would haunt the coalition for decades to come. Thokvar's 6 hands trembled as he reached the end of his story. The cantina had transformed around them. Without anyone noticing, conversations at other tables had died away completely. Alien patrons from a dozen different worlds sat frozen in their seats, drinks forgotten, all listening to the veteran's words with the horrified fascination of people watching their worst nightmares come to life. The Andromedan trader at the bar had stopped counting his credits. The Centauri smugglers in the corner booth sat motionless, their usual loud bragging replaced by uncomfortable silence. Even the bartender, a grizzled ex-marine who'd seen action in 5 different wars, stood perfectly still with a glass halfway to the cleaning unit. "We won," Thokvar said, his voice heavy with bitter irony. Kepler-7 fell after 8 months of fighting. The human mining colony was completely eliminated. Every building destroyed, every defender killed. Mission accomplished. His compound eyes fixed on Lixara's recording device with an intensity that made her want to look away. "But we learned something terrible during those 8 months of hell."
Ow.
"Did you learn?" Lixara whispered, though part of her no longer wanted to know the answer. "Those weren't soldiers we fought." Thokavar's voice dropped to barely audible levels, forcing everyone in the cantina to strain forward to catch his words. They were miners, engineers, shopkeepers, teachers, parents, children. Their actual military was never deployed to Kepler-7. We never even saw their real warriors. Lixara felt her bioluminescent patches dim with shock. The implications of what he was saying hit her like a physical blow. "What do you mean their military wasn't there? The peace treaty signed 6 months after Kepler-7 fell. Do you know why the coalition agreed to it so quickly? Why we suddenly became so generous to these primitive humans after spending 8 months trying to exterminate them?" The Auvert's laugh was hollow, the sound a broken machine might make. "Because our intelligence services finally figured out what we were really dealing with." He leaned forward across the table, his scarred face inches from the camera. The scars weren't just from weapons. Some looked like they'd been made by tools. By improvised weapons that no military would ever design. Civilian equipment turned into instruments of war by desperate people fighting for their lives. Humans don't have a military the way other species do. They don't have professional soldiers who fight while civilians hide in bunkers. Every human is a potential soldier. Every civilian is a warrior waiting to be awakened. Every child grows up learning skills that can be turned to warfare at a moment's notice. The cantina was so quiet now that the hum of the station's life support systems seemed deafeningly loud. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's engines fired as another vessel departed for destinations unknown. But the sound felt like it was coming from another universe. "They don't train for war the way we do," Thokavar continued, his voice gaining strength as he spoke truths that had haunted him for decades. "They live it, breathe it, dream it. It's built into their very nature."
Ow.
When cornered, when threatened, when pushed beyond their breaking point, they become something that goes beyond our understanding of combat. They become death itself, wearing a human face. Thokavar stood slowly, his damaged joints protesting after hours of sitting in the same position. The injuries from Kepler-7 had never fully healed, not the physical ones, and certainly not the mental scars that ran deeper than any plasma burn. "I saved 3 humans during the siege," he said, beginning to move toward the cantina's exit. "Pulled them from burning buildings when coalition bombardment brought down entire city blocks. One was an elderly female named Hiram. She couldn't have weighed more than 50 kilos. Looked like she'd spent her life tending flowers or teaching children." He paused at a table where a group of young Altarian spacers sat nursing their drinks. They looked up at him with the wide-eyed expression of people hearing about war for the first time. "Do you know what Hiram said to me after I carried her to safety?" "She thanked me politely, like it helped her carry groceries. Then she asked if I had family back on my home world. When I said yes, she smiled, actually smiled, and told me she hoped they never had to see what humans were capable of when protecting their own." The Altarians exchanged nervous glances. One of them, barely old enough to hold a pilot's license, spoke up. "What did she mean?" "She meant that everything we'd seen on Kepler-7 was just the beginning. The miners and engineers and shopkeepers had turned themselves into warriors because they had to. But the real warriors, the ones born for combat, were still out there, watching, learning, preparing." Thokvar resumed his journey toward the exit, his footsteps echoing in the unnatural silence. Other patrons turned to watch him pass, their faces reflecting the same mixture of fear and fascination that had gripped the entire cantina. "The humans are out there now, Lixara," he said without turning around. "Spreading across the galaxy like seeds on the solar wind, building colonies, establishing trade routes, making friends with dozens of different species. Their perfect neighbors, polite, generous, brilliant scientists, and engineers who solve problems instead of creating them. He reached the cantina's main entrance, where the automatic doors waited to release him back into the station's crowded corridors. His silhouette was dark against the artificial daylight that flooded the commercial district beyond. But every single one of them carries the genetic memory of what happened on Kepler-7. Every human child learns the story of how 30,000 colonists held off 50,000 coalition troops for 8 months. Every human adult knows exactly what they're capable of when someone threatens what they love. The doors hissed open, and the sounds of normal station life flooded in conversations in a dozen languages. The whir of transport pods, the distant music from other entertainment districts. It was the sound of civilization continuing, of life going on despite the dark truths that lurked beneath its surface. "Sleep well tonight, young reporter," Thokvar said, his voice carrying clearly across the silent cantina. "But remember this. Somewhere out there, in the dark between stars, the humans are watching. They're building, growing, becoming something larger than they were before. And they remember everything that was done to them." The door hissed shut behind him, cutting off the outside noise and leaving Lixara alone with her recording device and the terrible weight of knowledge. Around her, the cantina's patrons began to stir, conversations resuming in hushed tones as people tried to process what they'd just heard. 3 days later, Lixara's interview aired across 12 star systems simultaneously. The Galactic News Network had never seen response numbers like these. Billions of beings, across hundreds of worlds, stopped what they were doing to watch the old veteran tell his story. The reaction was immediate and profound. Some species called for renewed military action against humanity, arguing that such a dangerous race couldn't be allowed to spread unchecked. Others pushed for stronger alliances, believing that having humans as friends was infinitely preferable to having them as enemies. Emergency sessions were called in governing councils from the Andromedan Republic to the Centauri Trade Federation, but all agreed on one fundamental truth: the galaxy would never be the same. In the depths of space, far from the political storms brewing in capital cities across known space, human ships continued their quiet expansion. Cargo vessels carried families to new worlds. Research ships explored uncharted systems. Colony transports delivered settlers to planets where they would build new homes under alien suns. The humans aboard these ships were teachers and doctors, engineers and farmers, artists and scientists. They carried no weapons of conquest, harbored no dreams of galactic empire. They were just people looking for new places to live, work, and raise their children in peace. But they carried something far more dangerous than weapons or territorial ambitions. They carried the absolute certainty that they would never again allow anyone to threaten what they held dear. The lesson of Kepler-7 had been written in the DNA of their species. When pushed to the brink, humans didn't break. They became something else entirely. The peace held across the galaxy had to, because nobody wanted to discover what humans would become if it didn't the end.